So today I'm here with something slightly different, and that's an assembly video of, as you might notice, FPG9 kit for gas blowback VE glocks, or third generation Tokyo Maru glocks, not the fourth generation. Let me put everything aside. Okay, now let's talk the important things. This is a Glock trigger bar, and you will need a second one if you don't wanna damage your OEM. As you can see, mine have some scratch marks on it, and I will tell you what I did. First, I sanded this notch in there, and that's because of the pin that is used to hold a grip in a frame, and that pin can interfere with the trigger movement, so the notch is here to allow the trigger go back enough. You don't need to do this yet if you don't use one single pin, but instead two smaller pins that don't go through, so there's nothing in the way that could stop the trigger. The main modification I did to the trigger bar is I sanded some material. Again, you can see here it's a few millimeters. Let me check that for you. I sanded it down about 2 millimeters. Why I did that? That's because, again, of the grip and those mounting points. The trigger needs to sit those 2 millimeters lower, and if I want to keep the dimensions close to the original one, we need to sand the material down. So again, this is not necessary. This is, even with the modification, you should be able to put this trigger bar back into the stock frame, and the gun should keep working. However, I recommend you to just buy the spare one. It costs about $3-4. Now, this is the lower frame, and we will start with that part. I already have a few of them installed, mainly front grip, trigger, and the rail with trigger bar spring and slide catch. Now this is important because there is not enough space to use a spring for the slide catch from the OEM frame. We will need to make ourselves a new one. As you can see, there is a small spring plate which is bent into the L shape and inserted from here before the rail is installed. I'm not gonna take this apart because the rail is there pretty tight, but again, small spring plate, about 3 millimeters thick, wide, and I believe up to 0.5 millimeter thick, is bent into the L shape, inserted from this side in a special hole for it, and then it's secured by the slide rails so it can't fall out. Now, I already mentioned the trigger. For the trigger, you will need a homemade torsion spring. You can basically buy them. The dimensions are in Excel that you will download with steel files. So the trigger is installed because the rail itself is installed and secured by the trigger pin, and also part of the front grip is already installed, again with a torsion spring. There's no need to take it apart, just to show you how the gun is assembled. The pin for the front part of the front grip, a big part of the front grip actually, is inserted through this hole, and it's just long enough to hold this flip-flop part, but it does not protrude into the big cavity where the front grip will be stored. The pin can't protrude out of this flip-flop part because then you wouldn't be able to fold the front grip inside. So these are the important things, and let's start assembling the FPG9. This is the hammer unit, and we will also take a trigger. First of all, we will put the trigger in its place. Then the trigger unit, or the hammer group basically. Okay. So the hammer unit is in place. We will secure it with OEM pin, and also screw from here. This might be quite tricky because there is not it could look that there is not enough space for your screwdriver, and you can just, you know, screw it directly. You have to screw it a little bit under the angle, but I think it's still doable. Okay, so that's the hammer unit. We can try if everything works. And sits in its place. Now let's assemble the grip. The grip, in this case, already have installed the mag catch, and basically the grip catch, which is under the pressure from, again, torsion spring, and is secured in place by a 2mm pin. The mag catch is installed a bit differently than on the OEM frame. Basically, you just put it in place, but then to keep it under the spring pressure, you will need a spring wire. It should be around 1mm. If I recall, maybe a bit more. Yeah, about 2mm. Or you can, as I have here, have a bunch of small thinner spring wires together in the bigger hole, and those spring wires will keep pressure on the mag catch. Now the trigger guard, again connected with a 3mm pin here. Installation is easy. Just press those two parts together and it's installed. Now I'm using longer pin that go through the whole frame. You can use two smaller from each side. Now it's in place. The front part of the trigger guard is under pressure from again torsion spring and is kept in place by a 3mm pin. So let me install this off camera. Okay, that's it. Now let's take if the grip springs back. That's okay, I guess. And if the grip latch actually latches on its place and holds the grip firmly. If you are having a problem with the grip not staying in its position, like if the catch is just catched halfway through, then take a sandpaper and sand this edge. Different printers prints differently, the tolerations are a bit off, so it might be necessary to sand it down. Sand it just a bit, try it, and if it doesn't fit, then again just buy a bit. In my opinion, it's important to not have any slack in here. As you can see, it's there just firmly, no wobble. So keep that in mind. Now, when we have all those basically important things for the gun to work, let's try the cycling of the gun. Now, again, this is important, and you might need to do some troubleshooting before we put the slide on. Just be sure that the trigger bar can sit where it should, and when there is cycling of the hammer unit, so when you press the trigger it fires, and when you cock the hammer unit, the trigger goes forward. If that's not happening, check if there is not any rubbing between the frame and the trigger. You send it to 2 millimeters from the trigger bar, and if the trigger is correctly mating with the trigger bar. Also make sure that there is an angled plane here. It's smooth, as smooth as you can make it, because the barrel tilting, when the barrel tilts, the part of the outer barrel just slides on that angle part, so the barrel tilting depends on how smooth or rough this is. Also make sure you clean the supports correctly. So now with the slide in place, make sure the slide catch is firmly in its position, that the spring plate actually springs this part upwards, and let's try the action. So I rigged the slide, the trigger fires basically, and then I rig the slide again, trigger resets. Now let's put the gun in a semi-auto and try again, but with fingers on the trigger. Amazing. If you are using G18C, there is a flat version of the fire selector. You have to change that part. Also, I forgot to mention the back side is replaced with flat one, and while installing the rail you also should have installed the slide catch. You can print one, and I recommend you to do so, or you can take your OEM one and bend the outer part of the slide catch a bit upwards. But because most of these parts are made from some zinc alloy, basically Chinesium, it probably will crack like mine did, so I recommend you to print it. Now I recommend you to try the action with your magazine. Okay, the gun jumped into the float of fire. Anyway, we can see it works. If you are having with gas venting bad gas efficiency, then check that if this is dimensions of the grip, basically the height, is 86. In the past I had problem with the grip because my printer wasn't printing as it should in a Z-axis, so the part was slightly bigger or slightly shorter, so that could be one of the problems, that your printer is printing slightly, off dimensions in a Z-axis, and that would mean that your magazine sits a bit higher, a bit lower. So check that first basically. Then I would recommend you to check, when you press the mag catch, you can feel the sealing rubber on top of the mag actually hitting a slide. And even if that doesn't work, you should check the cycling of the gun again, if the knocker is resetting. So it works. Now the other bits. Let's put together the front grip. Should be fairly easy. You are supposed to have another torsion spring for the gripping part of the grip, but it's not necessary if this flip-flop, is what I call it, part have strong enough spring. Okay, so that's them. Now let's put together our upper case. We will need the basic rocking slide. Make sure it slides there nicely and smoothly. We will need our charging handle. You can put it in from either side, from left, from right. Okay, and now the locking button with guiding rod installed and springs. These are again in the Excel sheet. You can have one long spring or just few smaller ones. And also I should mention you're supposed to glue the guiding rod in this button. Okay, this was problematic. You have to align holes in this racking part and the charging handle. So charging handle is moving, locking part is also moving. So let's put it aside and take a look at the problematic connection between the stock and the frame. Again, two torsion springs from a stronger spring wire, because this part needs to be under the heavy spring load. And then you will need the pins, or you can use screws. There is nothing what would prevent you to use the screws, but if you have access to the machinery, you can make yourself those pins, as I did. Now, as you can see, there is a notch in there, and this notch tells you how the springs are going to be oriented, because this notch is for end of the spring to go in. So I'm gonna install these off camera and I will get back to you. So the spring of the stock and basically a cover are installed. As I mentioned here, I made myself a custom pins and they look really good. I also installed the cheek rest, which holds the cover in its position. So to disassemble it, you just push it upwards and then you can fold it. Spring, this one, torsion spring, have to be pretty strong because when the gun is unfolding, the stock itself is going upwards, and spring on the cheek rest have to be strong enough to push a cheek rest into the notch in the stock. And when that happens, the stock is secured. So now we have a stock and a cheek rest installed, and we will take our assembled basically cover with a charging handle and we will install it on a gun. Installation is pretty easy. Click on the front pivot pins, then you just close it. This spring button, keep the cover locked, and when you want to open it, press it in and fold it out. Now the last missing piece is the carry handle and the sides basically. These are made from two parts, carry handle itself and this lock-in tab basically. This uses a bit different approach than the original one, because in the original one you would have to have some kind of bigger flexible plate. We are just using a pen spring which is inserted in the center of the recess for this top, and then you just pull the this part, this tab from side in, and it can be disassembled when it's not on the rail, but when the carry handle is on a gun, this sliding piece will not fall from side to side. It will just stay in place, but can be taken apart when it's not on a gun. So to assemble it, just push it upwards, slide it where you want it, and let it be. And that's basically it. Now you've got yourself an FPG9 body kit for your VE or for the Gento Camaro glocks. So now to demonstrate how does it work, put the magazine in, press this little tab of the flip-flop part, or how we are gonna call it, pull it from the grip. Now press the grip latch on the back, pull the grip. Now the cheek rest is going upwards, so you can fold the stock, and voila, that's it. This little small box is a pocket gun. Some of you might ask about further rounders, the long stick magazines. By default they are not compatible, and the reason behind this is this tab. This tab limit how deep the mag can go. As you can see, there is a groove for it, and in order to assemble the gun with the long magazine, you would need to push the mag a little bit deeper into the grip itself, because you know, if the mag is long like this, you're not gonna able to assemble the gun. And this is not possible because, as you can see, the movement of the mag is limited by its stop. So if you want to run your 30 rounders, long magazines in this kit, you are not gonna be able to fold the gun, but still you can run it, or you would have to grind this down on your long stick mag. But again, I do not recommend you to do this, because then it might not work correctly with your OEM Glock. I'm not sure if Tokyo Maru magazines have this step, but VE Max for sure have them. Anyway, this is it. If you run into any problems, contact me on the super Discord server, which will be in the description or in the comments of the video. And I hope you enjoyed this kit, and see ya with another project.